All right, well, welcome back. We're gonna go ahead and look at configuring our theme next now that we have the baseline for our HTML, CSS, and our JavaScript, okay? Now the main source file for our theme configurations is gonna be the Liferay look and feel.xml, okay? This is where we can add things like theme settings, application decorators, okay? Or they're actually portlet decorators specifically, color schemes, and we can also do things like bundle layout templates if we want to. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the 4th chapter of these videos. Now, theme settings can be settings added into the theme that allow us to do something, okay, which we'll look at here soon. They will allow us to create variables out of them and use those variables throughout our HTML or free marker files for specific configurations. We actually have some included already, and we'll take a look at adding more and what that actually looks like, okay? Theme settings can also be configurable. All right, if a theme setting is configurable, what that means is in the actual GUI, when an admin, for example, let's say a site administrator, is working with the pages, they can actually make the changes in the GUI without having to change any code in the theme itself. Okay, so a very simple example of this might be if I wanted to turn off all the borders for all of the widgets on any individual page. Okay, I could set up a theme setting that allows me to turn off the borders. It'll just be a simple checkbox in the GUI. And then an admin, once it's all deployed and set up, can just go in and click the button and it will turn everything off. Click it again, it will turn everything back on, and they don't need to do anything in the theme's code. Okay, so theme settings are pretty cool. We'll take a look at an example with some theme settings. Now, portlet decorators, or they used to be called application decorators, are now called portlet decorators. Okay, portlet decorators allow us to have some more flexibility as front-end developers over the actual decorator or border or design of our widgets, okay? So there are a few that you've probably already seen if you've worked with the previous version of Liferay 7.0, okay? And you will still see here in 7.1 as well in the classic theme. So there's barebone, borderless, and decorate, okay? Now, borderless, barebone, and decorate are examples of portlet decorators where we can have, let's say, the title and the border with decorate. We can turn off just the borders and keep that title there. That's going to be borderless. And then barebone is turning both of those off. Okay. We can add any custom portlet decorators we want. If we want to have a particular display, maybe a featured display, or we want it to look different, we want to add a nice border around there, maybe some image borders or something like that, we can do that. We can do whatever we'd like, okay? So this is where you would set that, and then you can actually add the CSS in our CSS files, which we'll look at a little bit later as well, okay? You can also add color schemes. Now, we're not gonna look at an example of this in this particular set of videos, okay? But basically, a color scheme would allow you to provide variations of CSS and images within your theme, okay? So developers could, if they wanted to, provide essentially mini themes packaged within the theme, okay? And then the site administrators could go ahead and make those changes. So if I wanted to have, a version of my theme with a red color palette and a version of my theme with a blue color palette, if I wanted to call it Fire and Ice or something cool like that, I could create some color schemes, and those options would be available to my site administrators for either all of the pages in any given site or individual pages, okay? And lastly, like I mentioned with the layout templates here, we can bundle those into the theme by adding them into our Liferay look and feel.xml. We'll talk about that a little bit later on when we actually create a layout template together, but it is an option as well. So when you deploy your theme, you can have packaged within it a number of additional layouts. So let's look a little bit more at our theme settings. Again, we'll actually build some of these out together, okay? So each theme setting can have the following properties. I've already mentioned the configurable property, okay? This will basically determine whether or not whatever this theme setting is can be changed by admins in the menu, okay? Specifically site administration, all right? There is the key, okay, and the key is going to be how we retrieve the value. We can actually take these keys and turn them into variables in FreeMarker, which we'll see as well. The type property is a pretty important property that will determine what kind of field your theme setting is going to be. So is it a text box? Is it a checkbox? Something like that. Okay. There's also the options. So for example, if I have the type select and I need to select between options, I can set the options there and it's going to be in a comma separated list. And what that would look like for our admins in the GUI is it would be basically a drop down and they would be able to see all of the options there. Okay. And then the value is going to be basically a property we can use to set a default value. So an easy example of this is if we have a checkbox, which is essentially a Boolean, the value can be either true or false by default. All right. For Portlet Decorators, as we'll see here in a little bit, they're actually pretty straightforward. We basically just need to have a Portlet Decorator tag, and it's going to give us an ID. Okay, and from there, it can accept two properties. So we have the Portlet Decorator CSS class. Okay, this is going to be the class that we can use to style in our _Portlet Decorator.scss partial. Okay, we saw that a little bit earlier. We're going to go ahead and come back to that. All right, and then there's also the Portlet Decorator, or the default Portlet Decorator property. Okay, and that's basically just determining whether or not the Portlet Decorator that you have created is going to be the default. Okay, so this is typically set on, let's say, the decorate Portlet Decorator that you see in the classic theme. Okay, that's going to be the default, and then you also have the other options. So you can modify that as you'd like. Okay, just a quick note on including color schemes. If you do want to include color schemes, this can be done by modifying the Liferay look and feel.xml. Okay, and in the Liferay look and feel.xml, you're including again the ID, the path to the CSS file, as well as the path to the images. Okay, and then you'd want to add some color scheme folders into your CSS and images folder and include the necessary files for both of those. Okay, so for example, if I were to go back to that fire ice example, okay, I might have an _fire.scss and _ice.scss, and that would be found in the source CSS color schemes folder. Okay, and then of course I would need to import those into my custom.scss. Okay, all right. If I wanted to bundle a layout template into my theme, okay, I would need to add a layout TPL folder to my theme. And then I would need to go ahead and make sure it includes the source file, which we'll look at a little bit later, as well as the image or the thumbnail for that particular layout. And then I would just need to update the Liferay look and feel to reference those files. Again, that could be done through a layout tag. Okay. You can find a lot of information on this online with our documentation, so I would encourage you to take a look there. But those are just some overviews of the kinds of things that we can do. Okay. All right, so what we want to do here for our theme, for the Livingston Fjord theme specifically, is we want to go ahead and add some theme settings, as well as add some application decorators. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that together. All right, so let's go ahead and come back to our theme folder. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open this up here. All right, I'm in the JavaScript folder from the last video, so I'm going to go ahead and come back to the main source section here. Okay. All right, and in my web INF folder, this is where I'm going to find my Liferay look and feel.xml, and then there's also a Liferay plugin package.properties. Okay. We're primarily going to focus on the Liferay look and feel.xml, but we're going to go ahead and, just like we did before, copy over some files from our exercise source, and we'll just need to replace what already exists in our theme here. Okay, so go ahead and open up the exercise source. Okay, open up the web INF folder and copy everything in the web INF folder here. Okay, and this will just include, again, some updated files, and the source is going to include some language files for us in our theme as well. Okay, so make sure to copy these. All right, open source, web INF, in our theme, and go ahead and paste everything in there and replace the existing files. Okay. All right, so go ahead and open up the Liferay look and feel.xml in Visual Studio Code. Okay. All right, you'll see here that we already have some existing settings. Okay. So we need to go ahead and insert some snippets. Okay. We'll start here actually with the Portlet Decorator. So let's start there and then we'll come back to our theme settings. Okay. All right, so just like we've done before, go ahead and highlight this comment here that says Insert Snippet 01 Portlet Decorators. It's going to be under the settings section. We'll come back to settings here in a little bit. Okay. Go ahead and type LFR. Okay, and choose the first option for Portlet Decorators. Okay. All right, so you'll see here that we are just adding the base decorators that we found in the classic theme. Okay, just like I mentioned, we have the Portlet Decorator tag, okay? And here we set an ID and a name. And then we have the Portlet Decorator CSS class tag, okay? And we have the name of that here. And we could use that CSS class to actually style the decorators in our CSS, okay? So let's go ahead and add a new custom Portlet Decorator. Okay, so go ahead and hit Enter after the closing tag of the decorate decorator. Okay. Excuse me, edit. Okay, back. Okay, and we're gonna go ahead and type this out together. All right, so go ahead and just add a new Portlet Decorator tag. Okay. And for the ID, we're gonna call it solid. Okay. And then for the name, we're gonna do the same thing, the capital. All right. Then we're gonna go ahead and come underneath, so hit Enter and Tab, and then we're gonna go ahead and set the class, okay? So it'll be Portlet Decorator, okay, and you can use the autocomplete if you'd like. Okay, Portlet Decorator, CSS class. And I'll have to do the closing tag here, Portlet Decorator, CSS class. Oops, there we go. All right, and we're gonna just call this Portlet Solid. Okay. All right, so that gives us a class, and then we could just simply close. Okay. There we go, nice and easy. So I can go ahead and click Save. All right, so this gives us a new Portlet Decorator. Now what we'll need to do is we'll need to actually add some styling for this. So we're looking at the process from top to bottom. So first, we need to set it in the Liferay look and feel.xml. Now what we need to do is we need to actually add styling for this new solid Portlet Decorator so that for any of the widgets, we can change it to this and it will apply the styling when we do. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up our theme again. Okay, and this time go ahead and go out of WebINF. So close that folder, or rather go back to the source of our theme. Open up CSS, and then we're gonna go ahead and open up the Portlet folder where we will find the Portlet Decorator.scss. Okay, go ahead and drag that in here. All right, and go ahead and highlight over the snippet comment here. Type in LFR. And if you come down to this, closer to the bottom of the list where you see 09 Portlet Decorator.scss, or rather just -scss, you can go ahead and add that and save it there. Okay, so this gives us some styling for decorate, for solid, and for bare bone. Okay, and you'll see for solid, it's pretty simple. We're just adding some background color and some border. Okay. All right, so that's how you would add a Portlet Decorator. It's nice and simple. Set it in the Liferay look and feel.xml, and then make sure that you add your styling in the Portlet Decorator.scss file. And this partial can be found in the base theme. in that build folder and then in the Portlet folder as well. Okay, so if you want to do exactly what we just did, make sure in your process to copy that from the build folder. All right, let's go ahead and look at an example of our theme settings next. Okay, so theme settings are going to be here. I just closed that last file and came over to my Liferay look and feel.xml. They can be found in the settings tag. Okay, and each theme setting is an individual setting. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and highlight over this second section here, and we're going to add some theme settings for our social media icons. Okay. So this will allow us to add social media essentially to our footer. So I said we'd come back to that. Here we go. All right, so highlight over that comment, type LFR. Okay, and theme settings. It's going to be that second one. All right, and we've added 4 new settings. Okay, so you'll see that we have a Facebook icon and then the URL for the icon, and it's just going to be facebook.com at this point. If we had a Livingston Hotels and Resorts Facebook page, we could go ahead and just link to that, for example. Okay, and the same thing with Twitter. Twitter icon and then the Twitter link URL. Again, if we had a Twitter account for Livingston Hotels and Resorts, we can go ahead and set that here as well. Okay, you'll notice these are not configurable settings. Okay, because we want to be able to use these settings to create variables and allow us to provide these icons and links in our footer, and we don't necessarily want that to be configurable. Okay, now we could make it configurable, and if we did that, admins on any site using this theme can turn off or on the Facebook icon or the Twitter icon. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next step here. So we have our new settings. Now what we want to do is we want to translate these settings into variables that we can use in our FreeMarker files. Okay. Whenever we want to update something like the footer, we want to add something there, that's obviously going to be in our Portal Normal or any new file that we've added. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this will look like. Let's go ahead and open up our theme source. Okay. Go ahead and close the CSS section. And I can go ahead and open up the templates folder here again. All right, we're back to HTML. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and drag the init custom FTL onto my editor. Okay. All right. Now what you'll see here at the top is we have some assigning going on. Okay, so we have some of the existing theme settings being translated into variables. Okay, you can see we're using the getter util. Okay, we're using theme display.get theme setting, and this is how we are referencing the keys so that we can translate the keys to variables that we can use throughout our FreeMarker files. Okay. All right, so let's add to this list. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and find the insert snippet 06 init custom settings here. Okay, it's going to be within that assign tag. I'm going to type LFR. Okay. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and add that 6th snippet here. Okay. So now what we've done is we've done basically the same thing. Okay, we're using the theme display.get theme setting to translate these keys into variables that we can now take advantage of. Okay. All right, so now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and add these social media icons and their links to the footer of our theme. Okay, so again, we're doing this from top to bottom. First, we added it to the Liferay look and feel.xml. Now we've added the variables that we can use. Okay. Next, we need to actually use those variables in our FreeMarker files, in this case, in the footer. Okay. So to start, let's go ahead and open up our Portal Normal again. Okay. Because you'll see here we have a social media FTL, but we need to make sure that we're referencing that in the Portal Normal. Okay. So go ahead and open up the Portal Normal. Scroll down to the footer section. Okay. And you will see a comment here to insert the 07 social Portal Normal here. Okay. So go ahead and type LFR. Okay. And this will just simply be an include. Okay. So this will be include with the full templates path variable that we've seen before and socialmedia.ftl. Okay. All right, so now that we have the include here, we can go ahead and update our social media FTL file. So go ahead and open up your theme again and drag the social media FTL into the editor. Okay. We're going to add a snippet here as well. Again, we're focusing here on the process, not necessarily the specific code. Okay, so you guys can get a better understanding of how this works. All right, and go ahead and find the 8th snippet here, social media footer. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this here. Basically what we have here is a giant if statement. Okay, for the icons. Okay, so it's using those variables that we just set, all right? And we are putting them into a list. Okay, so if the Facebook icon exists, all right, we can basically set a link with the URL. Okay, and then we can have a class with the icon here. We'll obviously need to style these in our CSS. And the same thing with Twitter. We have an if statement that gives us the URL link, and then some classes for the icons that we'll need to style as well. Okay. All right, so this gives us the baseline for adding these icons into our footer. Okay, the last thing we need to do here in order to finish this process is, of course, add styling for some of the classes that we've added here for our Facebook and Twitter icons. Okay. All right, so go ahead and open up your theme source again. Okay. Go to CSS and then partials in your theme source. Okay. And we want to go ahead and update our footer.scss. So go ahead and open that up in our editor. All right, and down at the bottom, you will see an insert snippet section here, okay, for 10 social media footer. Let's go ahead and type LFR like we've done before. Okay. And select that 10th section here. And what this will do for us is it will allow us to style our social networks ID, which we've added. Okay, we've of course added media queries here to make sure we have some responsive design. All right, and then we have some styling for specifically each list item and their link, as well as the actual icon colors for Facebook and Twitter. Okay. All right, so again, at a high level, you'll see we've jumped through a few files. So let me just do a recap of what we did here before we go ahead and deploy the changes. Okay, so first in the Liferay look and feel.xml, we've set our theme settings and we've given them their keys and their values. Okay. Next, in the init custom, we came and we assigned variables to those theme setting keys. And this, of course, includes their values as well. Next, in the portal normal, in the footer section, we added an include to a new file that we have created called socialmedia.ftl. Okay. Next, we went ahead into that new file we created and added the free marker code needed to actually take advantage of these new variables that we created. Okay, so specifically Facebook and Twitter icon, and then Facebook and Twitter icon link URL. And then finally, we went ahead and added some CSS for that section that we added into our HTML. Okay. So doing all of this allows us to basically set this up and set it in our footer. And again, if we wanted to make this configurable for our admin, all we would need to do is come back to the Liferay look and feel.xml and add a configurable equals true property to any of these settings. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and run a Gulp Deploy on my theme. Okay, to make sure I have all of the latest changes deployed. Okay, I'm going to give it a second to load there. You'll see it's loading if you have the Tomcat bundle running here. Okay, you'll see that our theme is available for use. All right, so I should be able to go to Google Chrome, okay, refresh my page. All right, and once it's refreshed, I can see my icons, okay? Okay, so just to recap, in the Liferay look and feel.xml, we have the ability to add some settings, okay, or some configurations. All right, we can add theme settings, we can add portlet decorators, or application decorators is what they were formerly known as. We can add color schemes, and we can also add layout templates as well. We can bundle those in. What we did is we added some new portlet decorators, specifically the solid portlet decorator. And then we've also added some theme settings for our Facebook and Twitter icons that we wanted to add to the footer, and walk through the process for what it would look like to set that up from the XML configuration to the HTML variables to the actual CSS styling. Okay. All right. So for the next section, what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of the final options for our themes, including themelets, bundling some resources, and then we'll be done with our theme project. Okay, so stick around for the next video and we'll continue on.